Welcome you to this closing session of the 17th Global Day of Prayer. I hope that you had the opportunity to participate in several of the sessions from last night. We had many ministers of the gospel share the word with us and lead us in prayer as well. I want to thank every one of our special ministers of the gospel who blessed us so much with God's word and prayer. Thank you. Thank you. The Lord bless you immensely. We had time to pray and meditate on the word since we opened last night. And you know, God told us to pray because He intended to answer. Prayer is not man's idea, it's God's idea. It wasn't us suggesting to God that we needed to pray. It was His idea. He asked us to pray because He was desirous of answering our prayers. And He told us that when we pray, we should also receive. It says, ask and receive, that your joy may be full. He wants our joy to be full. He wants our joy to be full. And we especially asked many things on behalf of our nations, our world, and the leaders, as He asked us to pray. There's some things I want us to deal with in prayer in a few moments. I want to show you a documentary, and after that, we'll take actions. Yesterday, we took actions. We're going to take actions after you watch this. The CO2 agenda. Watch.
It's a wonderful business opportunity, okay? You want climate, we'll give you climate.
There's a huge amount of money involved. This is a huge, big money scam.
There are not just now billions, but there are trillions of dollars at stake.
It's a story of self-interest and big government funding.
People like me, our careers depend on funding of climate research. This is what I've been doing just about my whole career. This is what the other climate researchers are doing with their whole career. They don't want this to end.
If CO2 isn't having the huge negative impacts that we claimed it was having originally, how are we going to stay in business?
A lot of people's livelihoods depend on it. They're not going to give that up.
So the hoax is about carbon emission. Oh, there's so much carbon emission. This is fraud. I won't describe what is happening.
This is a story of the corruption of science.
There's no such thing as a climate emergency happening on this planet now. There's no evidence of one.
The climate alarm is nonsense, you know, it's a hoax. I've never liked hoax. I think scam is a better word, but I'm willing to live with hoax.
It's a story about the bullying and intimidation of anyone who dares to challenge the climate alarm.
To speak up against or about climate change in any sort of skeptical way was essentially career suicide.
Activists are even calling for any skepticism to be criminalized.
It's a wonderful way to increase government power. If there's an existential threat out there that's worldwide, well, you need a powerful worldwide government, to cope with it.
We see all these kind of authoritarian measures being adopted in the name of saving the planet.
You've suddenly got the population under control all over the world.
Fossil fuels is a myth. Hydrocarbons are renewable energy, created by high-temperature chemical reactions between the Earth's core and mantle. The idea that CO2 causes climate change is another laughable myth. The sun is not static. The real reason of changing temperature is that the Sun-Earth distance varies due to what is known as solar inertial motion, which is the movement of the sun following the barycenter of the solar system, not the geometric center. Water vapor is the only real greenhouse gas with any effect on warming. CO2 should increase, not decrease, to green the planet further. Global warming saves lives while cooling ends many more. It is all a historical con by the oligarchic class which funds all scientific establishments in order to defraud the naive and gullible through further taxation and hand out public money to private energy companies in the form of faux green subsidies.
I told you that the biggest problem in the world is deception. And those who are masters of the art want to make sure that others have no voice to be able to give a different narrative. They want to be the only ones to speak. Just to let you understand the clandestine work on climate change.
Climate change. Climate change. Climate change.
Climate change. Our planet's climate has changed throughout history, alternating between ice ages and warmer periods. Earth has been through at least 5 major ice ages. So if the climate has always changed, why is climate change such a big issue today?
It's about trying to have a monopoly on science for another super control. Let's use the very basic illustrations and analogies. Human beings take in oxygen and emit carbon dioxide. Plants produce oxygen and they use carbon dioxide. Now, it's easy for us to know that we do emit carbon dioxide. All right? You have to study some more to realize that plants actually give up oxygen and use carbon dioxide. You can't just know, because you know you breathe. You inhale oxygen. You exhale carbon dioxide. But you don't see plants. You don't see that happening with plants. You don't know. You don't know by looking. There had to be some further study to come to that conclusion. So it would have been easy for us to say, now, if we increase in the world, we're gonna consume all the oxygen. We're gonna consume it. And I dare say, all the oxygen in the world is not given by plants only.
CO2, it's the gas we associate with climate change, but it's also needed for life on Earth to function normally. How our planet manages the levels of CO2 is called the carbon cycle. CO2 is released into the atmosphere, for example, by animals' respiration, forest fires, even agriculture. Plants reabsorb the CO2 through photosynthesis. But in the 1800s, that process started to change radically. It started with fossil fuels, sources of energy trapped deep underground from the fossilized remains of plants and animals. For the fuel to power everything from your car, to the furnace in your home or office building, to the plane you take on your next vacation. We owe the modern world to them. CO2 is a relatively simple molecule composed of one atom of carbon and two atoms of oxygen. When heat from the Earth's surface gets beamed back into space, it gets absorbed by the CO2 in the atmosphere. As the CO2 absorbs that energy, its molecules move faster and faster. And as they do, they transmit heat energy around to other molecules, causing them to move faster as well. That cycle repeats itself over and over, trapping heat energy and warming the planet in the process. All because of a naturally occurring molecule that's being emitted into our atmosphere at levels that have risen exponentially since the middle of the 20th century. Matthew Osman is an assistant professor of climate science at the University of Cambridge. He says Earth's atmosphere naturally contains greenhouse gases that make life on Earth possible.
Without CO2, life on Earth actually wouldn't be possible. It's estimated that without carbon dioxide, Earth's surface would be somewhere in the ballpark of 30 to 35 degrees Celsius cooler than it is at present.
We all are said to produce over 20 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually, and that needs to be brought down to zero. There have been complaints by certain individuals and organizations that the amount of carbon dioxide that is released is too much, and that there has to be a reduction of the carbon dioxide that's released into the atmosphere by billions of people around the world, not just machinery, etc. That is one. But that the amount coming out of humans is so much because of the population.
Now, we put out a lot of carbon dioxide every year, over 26 billion tons. For each American, it's about 20 tons. For people in poor countries, it's less than 1 ton. It's an average about 5 tons for everyone on the planet. And somehow we have to make changes that will bring that down to zero. It's been constantly going up. It's only various economic changes that have even flattened it at all. So we have to go from rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero.
Those that produce carbon dioxide, and that this is not good for the world. All right? So carbon dioxide must be reduced.
Why remove the gas of life? And without carbon dioxide, you have no life on Earth. And if we halved the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we would probably have no plants, and the whole animal kingdom would collapse. We can live in a very high carbon dioxide rich atmosphere. Life has in the past. Every time in the geological past we've had a carbon dioxide rich atmosphere, we have had a massive expansion of ecosystems. Evolution has been driven very hard by this. We love carbon dioxide. We live on a carbon dioxide rich planet. We could not survive without it. So why should we be removing plant food from the atmosphere when it hasn't been shown?
That there will be no balance. And I'm warning, this is not about carbon emission. It's about trying to have a monopoly on science for another super control.
More CO2 is good for the world. It's not bad for the world. And so it's absurd to be trying to reduce CO2. We're in a CO2 famine now compared to what is normal for plants. And just about any plant, if you give it more CO2, and a lot more, it will do better. If you look from satellites, Australia is a poster boy of greening of the entire world, especially Western Australia. So it's unbelievable that they've managed to turn this beneficial gas, a part of life, into a threat.
The equation on CO2 is actually a very straightforward one. If you sum up the CO2 that gets emitted, that leads to a temperature increase. And that temperature increase leads to some very negative effects. The effects on the weather, perhaps worse, the indirect effects in that the natural ecosystems can't adjust to these rapid changes, and so you get ecosystem collapses. Now, the exact amount of how you map from a certain increase in of CO2 to what temperature will be and where the positive feedbacks are, there's some uncertainty there, but not very much. And there's certainly uncertainty about how bad those effects will be, but they will be extremely bad.
It's not true. It's a lie. It's founded on a lie. It's founded on a lie. They created the data. They're lying to you.
The equation has four factors. Thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's